All right, the next thing on our agenda is the Y2 consultants to present on the pretreatment plant startup and bring us up to date.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, I would like to introduce you for a discussion with Y2 consultants who are overseeing the pretreatment plant startup project. So in this, I'd like to introduce to you Lou Harmon and Rich as well from Y2, where they both have experience with the water, wastewater, program manager positions at the Department of Environmental Quality. So we have a really good team. I just want you to know that they have a tremendous amount of experience. And so with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Rich and to Lou.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. We're here to give you an update. We're both going to have a little spots here where we're going to talk. And then toward the end, if you got some questions, we'd be more than happy to answer whatever that might be. The purpose of what we're coming here is the focus here would be everything is focused on increasing the supply of the potable water, especially during periods of peak demand in the situation that you have. We have developed a schedule and we've assembled a team. I'll let Lou speak to those two things.
Honorable Mayor, Council. First of all, I'd like to talk a little bit about the team that you've contracted with Y2. I've got over 50 years of experience, and Rich has got over 30, and we've been working together as a team in a lot of places, and actually a lot of countries. We were in the Air Guard together. The Y2 team, besides Rich and I, we have Bud Spillman with us, not here this evening, but he is a chief operator, was the chief operator for the city of Cheyenne when Cheyenne started up their $32 million water treatment plant about 20 years ago, the most complicated one in the state. And when he retired, he was so good that national consultants came and found him to help start up a couple of big water plants in Colorado. So we're thrilled to have Bud on board with us. Bud Spillman, you guys have a very experienced Bud on your crew, on your staff as well, Mr. Dimmick. And Bud's what really gives us the push to really know what it's going to take to get the right chemicals in the water to cause it to precipitate out so that we can put clean water to your, or cleaner water to the filters that you depend on to provide your drinking water quality. We have Veolia, which is a successor corporation to U.S. Filter that designed the pretreatment plant in the first place. And we have Browns Hill, which is a SCADA, or computer controls firm. So we have a complete firm that's really got a lot of experience and been down this road before, and we're very confident that we can figure out how to get the ActiFlow is the name of the brand name of the process, how we can get that up and running so that you have the water that you need next spring and summer when the demand goes up with irrigation. We have a 30-point schedule here. I'm not going to try to cover every point on it, but we got started about the 1st of July on this project. The ActiFlow plant was built in the year 2000, which somehow got to be 22 years ago. Well, it's not long in my life. But it actually has never really functioned for more than a couple of 3 months in that 20 years. So we're finding lots of things that we've got to clean up, fix, repair. As a result of that, our goal right now is to do a hand-controlled run of treating water out of Peking Reservoir in January, And once we master the process there, we've adjusted all our chemical dosages and how we run all the equipment. Then we'll go back and study it for a week and come back a week later and spend a week trying to run the plant fully automatic like it would operate next summer for you. That will require some careful management on the part of your staff, because we're going to be making more water than Rollins uses that time of year. So we're going to plan on how to not have to waste that water by pulling down some reservoirs, pulling down some storage tanks so that we can fill them back up when we're running that way. Then finally, we're quite confident that the 1st of May, we'll be ready to start that plant up. And we're recommending that we start the active flow process the 1st of May, even though you might not actually have to have the water until June, because we want to get it running. We want to get it all tweaked and adjusted before it has to be working. And then, so the idea is when the period of peak demand comes, we're trying to avoid the situation where we go out on the day when the peak demand is and we throw the switch and something's not working. We want to find that problem and fix it before we get there. So I won't go into any more detail on the schedule, and I'll turn it back over to Rich.
So, like Lou said, we're very confident with the team that we have. We all sync very well in what we're trying to accomplish here. The unique thing that we found out when we showed up at your plant that hadn't been touched for 20-some years is that things aren't always according to script. You got to work through some challenges. We had to work through a pump that was wired backwards. We had to deal with the safety issues, dealing with chemicals and everything that you have on site. We had drains that were in these basins that were leaking, and you had to fix that so they held the water. We had to go through and run not only a dry check, but a wet check on your active flow system to figure out where some of these issues were going, because, you know, we weren't here when they first did it, so you had to kind of troubleshoot a little bit. We found out some of the control panels were not communicating. You kind of need to know as it goes through the whole process what's going on so you know how to tweak it. We had a control valve not working. The springs were under repair, you know, so your demand was down. You had a line down that was coming from your river up that needed to be repaired. You had to figure out the lockout tagout procedures so that when people are in there, you ain't gonna have something mishap. We also had to replace some valves that weren't working properly. Maintenance of this equipment, they sat for 20 years. So, you know, you got oil and everything else you got to change on these. You had to figure out what you're going to do with that water. So we had to sample all of them. And you have to do a jar test. That's figuring out what amount of chemicals is going to do this. We also had to kind of do a little bit of research because you've had a couple dry runs on this process with chemicals, and what happened was they didn't quite have it set up and you were getting your filters sliming up, and so your filter runs were much shorter. So you had people working their rear end off just trying to get your water that's coming. And the reason you got to treat it is because you're bringing in surface water. You're fine when you're doing your wells and your springs, but you only have so much of that. We also had to stand up your laboratory. You don't even have one set there. We had to familiarize your operators with this facility because it's just been sitting there. You haven't been using it. Your basins actually seep water out of them. And so we're in the process of, they've got to clean them out, and then they've got to line them with a coating so that the water stays in there, and then you're not dealing with water problems where you got electrical and everything else going on there, and you're treating your water. So they're in the process of doing that, and that's why we're not getting there until January, because you got to deal with water that's running, and that holds a lot of water. And then ultimately, we're on your guys' dime for a couple of years to train your operators. And like Lou said, we've got Bud Spillman, and he's a level 4 operator. They don't get any higher than that. And he's been all over. He's been able to assist them even to the point where we're at, but we'll be around for a couple of years. So we're not just going to leave this to you when we get it up and going. And then ultimately, once you get it running, you're going to have to optimize that flocculant and that polymer dosage to maximize what your filters can produce, water going out. So ultimately, question in the room, what we believe is it will be able to get you water to water your lawns probably twice per week when this gets up. But you also have a water demand that is more than you currently provide. So that runs in a little bit of struggle. So as we went through this process, there's some things that we've learned. One of the things is the misuse of the filters, and that's the proportioning of what water goes to them and treated water. And so if you do that balanced, you can get more going through there. We also had to deal with your active flow in your springs that are going on, but we also figured out that what was causing your filters to slime up was the polymer that gets carried over. So we've figured out what we can do by adding just a little bit of coagulant that will reduce that amount. And so we're in the process where we've done a couple jar tests, not only with Veolia, but we've done it with Hawkins, and they're up in Montana, and they supply chemicals to other active flow plants as well. And that's your cheapest price, and they have figured out the proper coagulant and polymer that we need to use for this. So here's some things for you to think about, because realize this is what we're focused on, but really your resources are some things that you might want to think about both short-term and long-term. So it's good that you were working on your springs. I would encourage more of that, because if you can put more of your resources to water that doesn't need treated, then it only has to go through the treatment plant. I would also encourage you to look at your well field. If you could develop that, then when you do need it, when this drought comes, which tends to be for whatever reason a 10-year cycle or about that, you have to pull water from your river. So if you have a means of ensuring that your demand is there, these are just bumps in the road and not major things that you're overcoming. Reduce the demand your cemetery is using. Of course, we're bringing on short-term the active flow online. The other thing is that you may have not considered or thought about is you got to run this plant the whole time in 24 hours. So you're probably going to need staff to ensure that they're running that. And the staff that you already have as operators that are doing both water and wastewater and everything else that they have to do aren't going to be able to fill that, because you don't plan on being sick. You don't plan on taking vacation and things of that nature. Long term is you're going to need to reduce your peak demand in a way that satisfies your peak demand. So these are some things to think about. Your reservoirs, both Peking and Atlantic, if you could cover those, and we've got some technology of thought there, it does a couple things. One, the things that are created in the water that you got to pull out to treat with chemicals, it reduces it because they're covered to begin with. It also reduces the evaporation rate of your reservoirs. So you've got a reservoir that's sitting there, and then you possibly don't have to run it through that pretreatment plant. Again, explore your options of increasing your water from your springs and your wells. And then, you've got other projects that Austin's working on. Your water supply rehabilitation project. You need to look at your water model. I'm pretty sure, and I've issued a ton of permits over the year, I know where your skeletons are. I know where you have problems with your infrastructure. You got lines that are not properly sized. You probably got lines leaking. You probably do not have a fair idea of where all your water goes. So if you can reduce that, then you're not having that water that you're paying money to treat go somewhere else. Leak detection. You probably don't know where some of those leaks are. There's even a concept of water reuse. I don't know if you've thought of it, but your wastewater treatment plant, for instance, if you could use that water to extinction and it was treated where you disinfected and then you even dealt with maybe gypsum, then you're not going to mess with your grass and you're going to be using water that comes from that to provide the nutrients that are already in the water to that, and you're not using treated water. The other things I'd ask you to maybe consider is your yard piping that is up around that pretreatment. They're limited by how it's set up to change what kind of source they're trying to do. And so if you invested in that, then depending on what that demand is, they have more options at their fingertips. And that's the gist of where we're at this moment. We're making very good progress with your staff here. We've worked weekly, having meetings and dialing in a lot of this stuff and figuring out where you've got bugs. But our hope is, like Lou said, that we've caught most of your issues there. And like you said, you've got a Hawkins that's involved with the chemicals, Browns and Hill, that you guys have already used to not only work with your pretreatment, but they're also on contract, I believe, for you folks to deal with your other SCADA systems. So we've, I think, got the right combination of teamwork here to get you where you're at. But I just wanted to throw a few thoughts out there for you guys to think down the road so that you get out of the situation and have other options. At that point, that's all I've got to cover. Is there questions or things that you guys would have?
Councilman Smith and then Martinez.
Let me ask, or let me clarify. Did you say that we will have to have restrictions only twice a week next summer? Is that what I heard you say?
That is all you're going to be able to get with the water that you have, with the combination of your resources, is you'd get probably twice a week. You would have to do something in addition to get it beyond that. You just have too much demand being pulled so many different ways that.
So if we did go ahead and do some wells and fix the cemetery well and drill a couple other wells for parks and stuff, that'll take some of the demand off.
Well, depends on where you do your wells.
Okay.
Your wells of where they're up at is probably where you have water. Mm-hmm. You'd have to have the professionals around to guide you into what you want to make sure. If you're going to put something in investment, you're going to get your buck out of it. I've heard some talk and discussions of wells around town. I don't know if that is a wise choice. You might be better off to find it somewhere else. But if you're ultimately trying to put water to your parks, the first question is what is that used for? If it's just water in the grass, there's other ways of getting that water there. And why spend money treating and then using that water to put on the grass when maybe you can use some other sources? You know, there's other ways of getting that water there.
Thank you.
Councilman Martinez.
I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I wish that 20 years ago we would have had a plan put together that would have told us of all these problems that you've had. And I think that councils in the past would have taken care of them. We've come a long ways from treating our water, chlorinating our water with a bucket and a bunch of chlorine and dragging it through a lake. That's when I got on this council. That's what we were doing to treat our water. And so we've come a long, long ways. We've got a treatment plant, a pre-treatment plant. And I wish we would have caught these problems that you brought up a little earlier. And I thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate you giving us an update.